I had recently moved to a new city, fresh out of a long-term relationship and looking for a way to break out of my comfort zone. My roommate, Lily, was my unofficial cheerleader, constantly nudging me to explore and meet new people. "Try a dating app," she'd suggested one night, nudging her phone at me. I hesitated but eventually gave in, figuring it couldn't hurt to put myself out there. After swiping and chatting with a few people, I matched with James. He seemed nice, respectful, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. After weeks of texting, he asked me to dinner. The night before our date, as I was getting ready, Lily pulled me aside with a strange look on her face. She lowered her voice, almost as if someone could be listening. "I have a bad feeling about this guy," she said. Normally, Lily wasn't the type to worry. She was always the adventurous one. Her warning made me pause, but I chalked it up to nerves and went anyway. I met James at a cozy restaurant downtown. He was quiet but intense, watching me closely as if he was studying every move. His hands lingered on my arm when he touched it, his eyes darting across the room and then back to me with an unsettling focus. When he asked if I'd like to go back to his place, I quickly declined, uneasy about being alone with him. He seemed to take it well, and I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the worst was over. That night, I noticed several missed calls from an unknown number, and then texts started pouring in, each one stranger than the last. He hadn't stopped messaging since I left. "I feel like I've known you forever," one text read. "No one understands you like I do," another said. The words made my skin crawl. I blocked the number, hoping it would end there. The next morning, Lily pulled me aside again, her face pale. "James called me last night," she whispered, barely able to meet my eyes. My heart dropped. I hadn't given him Lily's number. He shouldn't have been able to reach her. He'd somehow found out where we lived, and my mind raced with questions. How had he tracked her down? What else did he know? More texts kept coming from different numbers, each one more chilling than the last. "You're mine. You can't hide. I'll always find you." I felt like I was suffocating, each message tightening around me like a noose. I could feel his presence, even when he wasn't there, lurking just beyond my sight, watching and waiting. One night I came home to find my door unlocked, Lily nowhere to be found. I searched every room, panic clawing at my throat, until I found a note lying on my bed. It read, "I just wanted to see where my future girlfriend lived." My hands shook as I dialed Lily's number, my breath coming in shallow gasps. When she finally answered, she was safe at a friend's house. James had shown up at our apartment and somehow convinced her he was a friend of mine, coming by to drop something off. After that, I couldn't take it anymore. I left the city, left my job, and started over, terrified that one day I'd see his face again. And even now, I check over my shoulder, wondering if he's still out there, watching, waiting for his future girlfriend. I never thought I'd be on a dating app, but after moving to a new city for work, loneliness started to creep in. A few nudges from friends later, I gave it a shot. I matched with Sarah, a beautiful girl with a warm, friendly vibe. We connected over our shared experience of being new in the city and chatted for a few weeks before setting up a date. We agreed on a quiet cafe. I got there early, nerves buzzing as I waited. But after 30 minutes with no response to my texts, I thought I'd been stood up. Just as I was about to leave, Sarah walked in. But something was different. Her photos showed a smiling, approachable girl, But tonight she seemed almost vacant. There was none of the warmth from her texts. Her movements were stiff, her gaze distant. I brushed it off, thinking she might just be shy. Our conversation was strained. Shra's responses were clipped, almost robotic, as if each word had to be forced out. When I tried to make a joke or lighten the mood, she barely reacted, her lips twitching as if she didn't remember how to smile. Something felt wrong, but I ignored the chill creeping up my spine and kept trying to make small talk. When I asked about her family, her answers were vague, and her eyes kept darting around the room as if expecting someone. Eventually, I excused myself to use the restroom, grateful for a moment to regroup. After splashing some water on my face, I returned to find that she had vanished. Her chair was pushed back, her drink untouched. I looked around the cafe, but she was nowhere to be seen. Confused, I was about to leave when I noticed her phone lying on the seat next to mine. I figured I could call one of her contacts to let them know she'd left it. But as I picked it up, the screen lit up with a message from someone named Mark. It read, "Make sure he leaves." The words sent a shiver through me. Who was Mark? I quickly put the phone down and left the cafe, my mind racing. But as I walked to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. That night, I couldn't sleep, haunted by the eerie events. The next day, I tried messaging Sarah, but her profile was gone. I scoured social media, even checked local news, hoping for some explanation. But there was nothing. She had simply disappeared. I tried to forget about the date, but then the messages started. One night, just as I was heading to bed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Did you get home safe?" My heart raced. I hadn't given my number to anyone recently. I replied, asking who it was, but got no answer. The texts became sporadic, each one stranger than the last. "Do you remember me?" one read, followed by, "I didn't mean to scare you." It felt like someone was playing a twisted game, staying just out of reach, never revealing who they were. One night, a message came with a photo attached. It was a picture of me standing outside my apartment, looking at my phone. My heart dropped as I remembered that night. I'd been lost in thought, but I hadn't noticed anyone nearby. Whoever this was, they were close, too close. I called the police, but they couldn't do much without a direct threat. I changed my number, but the messages kept coming, as if this person had found a way into my life, watching my every move. Then, I received a final message that made my blood run cold. "Mark wants to know if you're still around." Mark, the same name from Sarah's phone. I felt like a pawn in someone else's game. Pieces moved by invisible hands I couldn't see or stop. And then, just as suddenly as they'd begun, the messages stopped. Weeks passed in silence, and I should have felt relieved, but instead, I was haunted by the quiet, dreading when they might start again. Months later, I was out with friends when I saw her. Sarah was across the bar, laughing and chatting with someone like nothing had ever happened. Our eyes met, and her smile faded, replaced by that same eerie emptiness I'd seen on our date. She tilted her head, staring at me, almost as if daring me to come closer. I didn't stick around to find out if it was really her or just my imagination. I left quickly, knowing that she, or whoever she truly was, would never really be gone. The messages, the photo, the vanishing, all part of a twisted game I'd never fully understand. But one thing was clear. Some people aren't looking for love on dating apps. They're looking for prey. I'll never forget the first time I came across Eric's profile. I was in the midst of one of those nights when loneliness starts to creep in, and I thought maybe it was time to dip my toes back into dating. He seemed ideal in that no-frills way. His profile was clean, with just a few photos of him hiking and one with a dog. He wasn't overly flashy, didn't try too hard to impress. His interests were common but well-rounded: photography, travel, nature. After a few exchanges, we'd struck up a comfortable, easy chat. Eric seemed warm, and after weeks of texting, he suggested we meet up. I thought, what could go wrong? When he arrived at the restaurant, I nearly didn't recognize him. He looked like his photos, sure, but something was different, something unsettling. His face, his eyes. I couldn't put my finger on it, but he looked almost blank, as if whatever warmth had been in his texts hadn't translated to real life. I tried to shake off the strange feeling, telling myself it was just nerves on both ends. As we started our meal, I noticed that Eric seemed evasive. I asked about his family, his job, his life before this city, but he kept his answers short and vague, like he was hiding something. His responses weren't just guarded, they felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced the art of dodging questions. Each answer left me feeling more puzzled and uneasy, and the more I pressed, the more Eric would lock eyes with me, smiling as if he knew something I didn't. He'd say things like, "I'm from around here," or "I don't really have much family." Odd, but I decided not to let it ruin the night. Halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom, hoping a brief escape would calm my nerves. I texted a friend, sharing my discomfort, but before I could send it, I realized I'd left my phone on the table. Cursing under my breath, I quickly washed up and headed back. When I returned, my heart stopped. Eric was gone. Vanished. So was my phone. I spun around, searching for him among the crowd, but he was nowhere to be seen. I rushed to the hostess stand, feeling panic bubble up inside me. She hadn't seen anyone leave, nor had she noticed anyone grabbing a phone. Now alarmed, I decided to cut my losses and leave. I felt exposed, vulnerable. I hurried to my car, eager to get home and away from the strange encounter. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Under the dim orange glow of a streetlight, there he was. Eric was standing still, his eyes locked on me, his lips curled into a faint smile that made my blood run cold. He didn't move, didn't even blink, just stood there watching. It felt like he was letting me know he could find me whenever he wanted. My hands shook on the wheel as I drove away, desperately hoping that was the last time I'd see him. But it wasn't. The next morning, I woke up to a message from an unknown number. My stomach twisted as I opened it. It was a photo of me in my car from the previous night, taken from outside the window. The caption read, "You look peaceful when you drive." My heart pounded as I blocked the number, hoping that would be the end of it. I tried to forget him, but the messages kept coming. Each time, it was a new number, a new message, and a new photo, always from the shadows, as though he was lurking just beyond my sight. One night, I thought I saw a figure standing outside my apartment complex. It was a silhouette, shadowed in the streetlight, but something told me it was him. My skin prickled, and I locked my doors and windows, every sense on high alert. The worst part was that he hadn't threatened me directly, hadn't broken any laws. He was just there, always lurking in the background. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't take the paranoia anymore. I stopped going out after dark, rarely left my apartment except for work. I finally moved across the country, leaving my life behind, desperate for a fresh start. for a place where he couldn't reach me. But even now, years later, every shadow makes me jump. Every stray glance feels like he's watching, waiting, and I know that somewhere out there, Eric is smiling, thinking about how easy it was to slip into my life and make it his own personal game.